Tony thought a lot. She was becoming dependent on her renewed relationship with Tom. Marie introduced her to the concept of naked days. Marie called them no-clothes days, but Tony preferred to be more direct. She spent most of her free time with Tom naked rather than simply naked. Naked better described what followed. She wondered if she could expand the concept to include other couples. There would be no problem with Tom. She could convince him easily, but how could she convince several of her girlfriends? It was a difficult problem. She would have to tread carefully. She didn't want to scare anyone by being too aggressive. They all had to embrace the idea individually and as couples. Conducting confidential discussions with each woman separately would be a nightmare and would take forever. She just didn't have the patience. She wanted to start right now, or rather, start it all. The more she thought about it, the more it seemed to her that a party where she could talk to everyone at the same time was the best and fastest way. Why not? Either it will work out or it won't. She talked to Tom. It took him a while to understand what she was suggesting, but she seemed to warm to the idea. They hadn't gotten that far with Marie and Mike, and she felt like he would really like someone on one time with Marie. Perhaps Tony can find other, less conservative partners. Certainly, he was ready. He would do whatever Tony wanted. Tony was very careful about the invitation. She wanted to create interest, enough that people would be curious and come, but not so specific that they would feel uncomfortable. When she was ready, she showed the invitation to Tom. He was helpful and suggested some minor changes to the words. Once they agreed on the final wording, she extended an invitation to 5 more couples, including Mike and Marie. Tony spent hours planning the party. She spent most of her time working on a plan for how she would present the topic. The plan seemed a little didactic, but it was a complex topic. Tony felt she had to include enough detail with pros and cons to keep everyone interested and ultimately get their buy-in. Tom left it up to Tony to feel the couple's mood and adapted accordingly. Cal and Cindy, a couple Tony knew from church, declined the invitation without comment. Tony thought so. They were very pious, but Tony included them because she thought Cal was a Muslim, and she knew Tom liked Cindy. Marie declined the invitation, saying that Mike and she had a previously scheduled business. 4 other couples responded in the affirmative. They were probably curious. The party took place. Tony was disappointed that Marie and Mike couldn't come to her party. She considered Marie her best friend and mentor, especially when it came to tonight's party. Tony invited 5 couples to join Tom and her this evening for a buffet dinner and a candid discussion about the cracks of intimacy in marriage. Her invitation stated that at some point during the evening, participants might be asked to remove their clothing. 3 couples accepted her invitation. Ed and Sam arrived a little before 6. Ed's real name was Samuel, but he used Ed to avoid confusion with his wife Samantha, who preferred to be called Sam. By 6:15, with the almost simultaneous arrival of John and Jillian, whom everyone called Jack and Jill, and Ted and Terry, everyone was assembled. They dined informally, sitting on chairs and a sofa in the living room and at the dining table. The conversation was light, but you could tell there was anticipation, and perhaps a little tension, in the air as dinner progressed. At 7:30, Tony invited the other 7 to join her in the office, where she moved furniture around and added more so they could sit in a sort of circle. Once they were settled, Tony introduced the theme of the evening. I understand that you are probably wondering why Tom and I invited you here this evening. I'm going to explain everything completely. However, I want this to be a discussion and not a lecture, so please participate. Feel free to interrupt me if you have questions or want to add comments or ideas throughout the evening. Since Tom and I got married, we have noticed slow but scary changes. I assume that for many of you the same thing happened as for us, and you thought that this was how it should be. All your loved ones said that this was the norm, and you pretended that it didn't bother you, but I think it bothered and still bothers you. The change I'm talking about is a decrease in sexual activity with your partner over time. I, for example, greatly enjoyed the early years of our courtship and marriage, when sex was a constant, daily, and joyful event. I miss the hours we spent satisfying each other's needs, desires, and fantasies. I suspect that some, perhaps all, of you remember those times in your relationships. I remember and hate that what happened to us is considered normal. Tony paused briefly to watch the other couples. She felt some agreement with what she was saying. Tom and I have been discussing this over the past months. We've looked at some of the consequences of normality. I have no research or authoritative opinion on this subject, but I believe that not everyone agrees that decreased sex drive in marriage is normal. I think that if both partners do not accept normality, then one of them tends to seek sexual satisfaction in other ways, including the other partner. I also believe that some may begin to resent the inaction associated with normality and react in antisocial ways, including psychological and even physical violence. I suspect that acceptance of normality is the underlying cause of many divorces. I, for one, don't want my relationship with Tom to end this way or end at all. I believe the problem is real and solutions are possible, but I would like to hear your thoughts. After a short pause, when Tony stopped talking, Jill spoke first. Jack and I are not married, but we have been together for over 20 years and have been faithful to each other all this time. I agree with Tony. I noticed a similar decline in our loving interactions. At the risk of giving away too much, we rarely have sex except on the weekends, usually Saturday nights. We have special occasions, but otherwise the sex is quite rare and predictable, as Tony described. I don't know why this happened other than we became comfortable and complacent, but I would go back to the early days of our relationship in a second. Jack nodded in agreement as Jill spoke. When she finished, he leaned down and kissed her quickly. Ted spoke next. Terry and I have been married for 27 years. We experienced the same thing. I think it started when we had boys. The workload and responsibility left little room for much else, and sex was one of those things that was put on the back burner, along with late dinners, theater, and sports. Most of it came back when the boys left home, except for the sex. Sitting here, I'm reminded of how often I think about sex without actually doing anything about it. Maybe I'm waiting for Terry to make the first move. I don't know. Maybe she's thinking the same thing, waiting for me to make the first move, but I never ask. I've been taught all my life that women deserve special treatment, and I didn't want to push sex unless I was sure she was already thinking about it. Terry confirmed Ted's thoughts. I agree with Ted. I'm not sure if I think about sex as often as he does, but when I do, Ted seems so happy reading or watching TV that I just let it go. While the others were talking, Ed and Sam leaned towards each other and whispered. They were the youngest couple in the group and had been married for only 9 years. In the silence that followed Terry's words, they stopped talking, smiled at the group, but did not offer anything. Tony was encouraged by the reaction. Thank you for your thoughts. I think you've described real normality. Next, before we can discuss solutions, we need to examine the reasons for the changes. Ted, you've already identified some of the reasons. Children, responsibility, and work all contribute to this. There simply isn't enough time to do everything, so we prioritize and some things get put off or abandoned. Extracurricular activities such as sports, exercise, and time together suffer, including sex. When opportunities return, such as when children leave home or work becomes easier, some return, but not always sex. I'm not sure why sex is missed. Anyone have any guesses? Maybe we've changed in ways our partners didn't expect, Terry suggested. I know I gained weight during this time, and so did Ted. I'm also not as fit as I was when I was younger, and I don't have the same energy. I agree, Jill said. Jack and I also became closer in other ways. I think we respect each other's feelings and personal space more than before. Ted is right that growing respect for each other makes it difficult to talk about topics that might upset the other person, and sex is definitely a hot topic. Tony turned to Tom and said, Tom, why don't you tell them about another scary problem we discovered? Tom was ready for the question. Tony and I went back to the beginning of our relationship to sort things out. Early on, even when we both wanted sex, we would circle around the topic before we started. It was a game that we both seemed to be playing without knowing it. We spent considerable time and energy creating situations in which it would be natural to remove clothing. Today, we simply don't have the time or energy to play the game, and we don't get the rewards. When Tom finished, Ed stood up and addressed the group. Sam and I see, and we think we understand the problem you are talking about. We have only been married 9 years and have no children, but I can already see signs of the trend you described in our relationship. I think we need time together to sort this out. Tony, we're glad you included us in the discussion, and we're glad you came, but if you don't mind, we'd like to leave now so we can go home and continue our discussion in private. No problem. I'm glad you came. I honestly hope you come to conclusions that work for you. I also want you to know that if you want to discuss this further, you can always come talk, either in person or with this group. When Tony returned from seeing Ed and Sam off, she felt fine. She noticed that the remaining 2 couples were focused on her and holding hands. Everything is going better than I could have hoped, she thought. I hope the next step will be just as successful. Well, there are only 6 of us left, she said. The next step is the hardest part of the discussion, the decisions. I don't have many solutions, and perhaps none that will work for you. I can only share what worked for me and Tom. I cannot guarantee that it will work for you or that you will be comfortable with it. I can say that Tom and I have sex every day, sometimes several times a day. I love our sex life, and I think Tom loves it too. It is so simple. I'm amazed we didn't discover this sooner. We can't really take credit for this. A friend suggested this, and it works for her and her partner. We just gave up clothes. It's a little more complicated than just that. We agreed that either of us, whenever we wanted, could declare any day a naked day for everyone in the house, and the other had to agree. Once the day is announced, none of us can wear clothes in the house for the rest of the day. The only exception is that if we need to leave the house, we can wear the clothes until we return. One of the consequences of this rule is that it applies to everyone in the house, and visitors must undress upon entry. This sometimes causes problems with unexpected guests or the occasional FedEx or UPS delivery person. However, some visitors surprised us. Naked Day also led to additional agreements, which we can talk about later. You don't need to worry. Today, none of us declared a nudity day yet. Does anyone have any thoughts on the possibilities? Terry spoke first. Somehow, I thought you were going in this direction. I wonder what it would be like if we were naked most of the time. I read that naturists find comfort and freedom in nudity, but I didn't think it led to better sex. I'm not suggesting naturism as a solution. Naturism is a public manifestation. No clothes is private, just between the 2 of you. It is different in that it allows free expression that would be taboo among naturists. Naturists in public are still bound by the normal standards of our culture. Personal nudity has no such prohibitions. Okay, if we're considering your proposal, what's the next step? Ted asked. Tom and I started naked one morning when I insisted on it. I suddenly found myself in a house where nudity was practiced, and I became one of those who had to make a choice. The woman in this house was a good friend, and I had an important reason for visiting. Also, the man was not present in the house, which made the decision easier. After a few hours, I found that the situation was quite comfortable. I had been pushing Tom for weeks with sexual overtures and overtures without success. I took the idea home and showed up naked in the kitchen one morning, had breakfast with him, and when I went into the bedroom, I made it clear that he was invited, but only if he left his clothes on the kitchen floor. He got the message, and we never looked back. Are you suggesting we all take off our clothes now? Terry asked. No, but I wouldn't mind if you did. I just suggest you try it in some environment, whether here or at home. Remember, being naked is not an invitation to free sex. We are still bound by reasonable social conventions that do not include spontaneous, unsolicited sex. I didn't mean to create a partner-swapping paradise. There's an added benefit to this. Getting used to the new feeling of us all being here to support each other may be easier than later when you're alone with your social inhibitions. I can't, and even if I could, I wouldn't make the decision for you. It must come from within and with pure intentions. Having said that, did you notice that Jill? She was playing with the buttons on her blouse while we were talking. At that moment, she completely unbuttoned her blouse. It looks like she's already made up her mind, even if it's subconscious. Everyone turned to look at Jill. She looked back, then down at her blouse and started laughing. Jack looked at her and laughed with her. "I've been listening," Jill said, "and I have to say, I can't wait to get started. I think I'm ready to start right now. How do you all feel about this?" This sparked a discussion to answer the question. After about 15 minutes, everyone was ready for it now. Ted was the last to agree, but Terry was pretty convincing that it had to be unanimous, and that's what she wanted. "Okay, I'm in," Ted said. "How do we do this?" Jack stood up and addressed the group. "I declare today Nakedness Day," and sat back down. Once the laughter died down, a process still needed to be worked out. Tony stood up. "I suggest working in pairs with our partners and removing clothes at a pace that is comfortable for us without paying attention to the others in the room." Tom quickly undressed and left the room to get more wine. As each couple took off their clothes, they stood there, a little nervous, unable or unwilling to look at the others. Ted and Terry were the last to finish, and as they undressed, they hugged and kissed before sitting down. Jack and Jill followed suit and sat down too. Tom returned with the wine and poured glasses before sitting down himself. "What's next?" asked Ted. "Nothing. We just spend the rest of the evening like any other evening where friends get together to chat and exchange small talk," Tony said. At first, everyone was a little tense. People talked to each other, but tried not to look. After about an hour, the mood in the room relaxed. People communicated as if nothing had changed. All 6 of them stood, walked around the room, and generally communicate freely. Tom opened another bottle of wine, which probably helped too. Tony asked, "So, how is everyone feeling?" Jill answered first. "At first I was very nervous and scared. I stood naked in a room with 5 other naked people. I didn't want anyone to look at me. I wanted to cover as much as possible with my hands, but realized that this would only attract more attention. After we sat down, I noticed that no one looked at me any differently than they looked at anyone else. My tension has decreased, and I am now completely relaxed." "I agree with Jill," Terry said. "Sitting here with everyone seems to be the new normal. I'm not sure how I got here, but here I am." In the subsequent conversation, everyone agreed that they felt more comfortable than they expected. Eventually, someone asked, "So, is there anything else?" Tony took the floor. "Perhaps, but I think we need time to get used to the new sensations and let things develop between each couple. Everyone needs to go home and let things develop naturally. If everyone agrees, we can meet here again in 2 weeks and share our impressions." Everyone readily agreed, and soon the party ended. People gathered their clothes and got dressed, although both Jill and Terry carried their underwear as they walked out. Afterwards, Tony was delighted to talk to Tom. "Everything went much better than I could have hoped. In 2 weeks, we'll be touching each other, and soon we'll be having a real party." "What kind of party are you planning?" asked Tom. "The one we were talking about. We will expand our sexual activities to include other people." "You mean you'll have sex with other men?" "Yes, and you will have sex with other women. I can't wait to experience sex with 2 men at the same time." "Is it true?" "Yes, and I'd love to see you have sex with 2 or more women at the same time." "I don't know." "Come on. You'll love it. It will be better than ever. Let's go to the bedroom quickly." On Monday, Tony received a call from Sam. "Tony, Ed and I left on Saturday night because I was extremely nervous about where the band was going. I spoke on the phone with both Jill and Terry, and I was right about the direction, but wrong about the goal. Ed and I agreed on Naked Sunday, and I can't believe how much it changed our lives in one day. Jill and Terry are very excited about the next party in 2 weeks, and if you don't mind, Ed and I would like to attend." "Wait, Sam. Of course, you and Ed will participate. We plan to discuss the changes we've experienced with naked days, so you'll need to be prepared for that, and everyone will expect you to be naked in the group too. I can handle it. Great. I'll send you an invitation when I send it to the others. See you in 2 weeks. This phone call only strengthened Tony's resolve to have a party where everyone was each other's partner. The following week, Tony sent the other 3 couples an invitation to a dinner buffet and further discussion the following Saturday. She reminded everyone that house rules will be in effect upon their arrival. On Saturday, Tony greeted each couple at the door as they arrived. Most knew about the house rules, but were not prepared to meet a naked hostess. However, her nudity made it so that couples undressed immediately upon entering. Once they were suitably undressed, Tony directed them to the living room, where a naked Tom was serving drinks. After dinner, everyone gathered in the office, where Tony added another pair of chairs for Ed and Sam. When everyone was seated, she started talking. Thank you everyone for coming again tonight. The last time we met, we agreed to experiment with naked days, and then get together again to share our experiences. Who wants to start? Jack spoke first. Before we continue our conversation, I would like to go back to 2 weeks ago. I must admit that I was a little disappointed that evening. I was interested in the concept of naked days and was a bit voyeuristic, wanting to see women without clothes. After we left, I spent some time processing my impressions. I've already shared my thoughts with Jill, and she suggested that I share them with you all. At first, I looked carefully at the women, trying not to be too obvious, but I quickly lost the desire to peek. At some point, I realized that the fantasy of seeing women naked was stronger when they were dressed, and when they were so casually naked, they no longer evoked the same feelings. For example, a woman in a swimsuit attracts my attention because I can fantasize about things I can't see. While I'm still attracted to a fully naked woman, it doesn't evoke the same, sometimes physical, response. I can't explain it except to say that for me the possibilities are more interesting than the realities. Ted echoed Ed's words. Agree. When I sat here naked 2 weeks ago, I initially wanted to, and did, look at women's bodies, but I quickly satisfied my curiosity and found myself actually listening to what was being said rather than enjoying the view. Jill spoke too. Thank you for saying that. At first I was nervous about having naked conversations with men. My common experience is that I often lose eye contact when talking to men. This seemed to be the case 2 weeks ago, but I did not experience this feeling a few minutes after the start of the conversation. I realized this after talking with Ed, and now I have independent confirmation. I'm starting to believe that wearing clothes causes more problems than it solves, and for that we can thank Eve. When the laughter died down, Tony resumed the conversation. I think you ladies have discovered one of the benefits of the naked philosophy. However, I would like to focus on some other benefits that you may have experienced over the past 2 weeks. May I ask you to share your discoveries, both individually and in pairs with others? We really grew closer to each other, Terry said. I don't mean just physically, but also emotionally and intellectually. We had more interesting discussions about everything from current events to family relationships. Physically, it also became better. Last week, Ted actually accompanied me to the mall, and we walked holding hands. I don't think we've done that for at least 10 years. Anyone else? Tony pushed. I think Terry said it right, Jill said. We don't spend as much time isolated from each other. A few days ago, we were having dinner at a popular restaurant, and we were sitting on the same side cabins for the first time since we moved in together. It was fun. Sounds like fun, Tony remarked. It was fun, so much so that we went out for dinner again last night. This time I wore a skirt and Jack wore shorts. The result was so funny. Wow, Sam interrupted. We left early last week because I sensed where the conversation was going and couldn't wait to get home. We took off our clothes as soon as we closed the front door and had sex. Ed nodded in agreement and then said, We've gone a little further than declaring naked days. We decided that we would be naked whenever we were alone at home. I have to go to work during the week, and I envy Sam, who can spend her day so casually. I'm looking forward to coming home later. Does anyone notice a common element in all these stories? Asked Tony. I'm not sure I can answer your question, Jack said, but Jill and I are much closer than before. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Touching. Tom and I experienced the same thing. And what? Asked Jack. We have found that touch is the most interesting thing about changes in our relationships. We decided we needed to get this under control so we don't get into trouble. How did you do that? We set a couple of rules. First, we agreed that we could touch each other anywhere, anytime, anywhere, but we also agreed to use common sense and prudence. We quickly realized that we might not always be on the same page about what common sense and prudence mean in the current environment, so we also created a safe word. This word, when spoken by either of us, pauses all touching until we agree to continue. This agreement has allowed us to play with each other in very unexpected places. The experience is no different from what Jack and Jill experienced. Can I ask you a couple of questions? What is your safe word, and do you have a touching rule in the house similar to the nudity rule? Sam asked. Let me answer the last question first. No, touching is an agreement between just the two of us. Unlike the nudity rule, this should not be imposed. It always works, in the house or outside the house. It does not apply to other people in the house. I think it would be possible to establish such an agreement between us and another person, but we have never thought of something like this. As for our safe word, I'm not going to share it. I suggest you find your safe word. Something common enough that when you need to use it, you won't draw attention to yourself because it seems out of place, but not so common that you'll use it accidentally. For example, green octopus might not be a good choice, and neither would baseball. What should we do next? Sam asked a little nervously. I don't think we should spend the rest of the evening touching each other in front of everyone in the room. I think we should call it a night and explore the possibilities as a couple. Next time we get together, we can share our experiences, at least the ones we want. With these words, the couples exchanged friendly hugs and kisses and got dressed. Tony noticed that the women were wearing their underwear again, and some of the men were too. After everyone had left, Tom and Tony sat in the living room with glasses of wine. Where is this all going? Asked Tom. Next time we get together, I think we can extend the touch to the whole group. I don't like it. Honestly, I don't like everything that happened and where it might lead. I thought we agreed on the end goal. No, you've agreed. I just walked along. I didn't want to create tension between us. I thought that you wouldn't go as far as you did and give up everything, or you would come to your senses and retreat. Now I see that neither will happen, and I must speak out. I don't think we should have another group meeting. But you want to spice up our sex life with other women? No. For me, you are all the woman I need. I don't want another woman in my bed, and I absolutely don't want another man in your bed. Well, I want to, and you should too. I'm not going to go any further. If you have another meeting, you will do it alone. I won't be involved in this anymore. I can't believe you'd sabotage me when we're so close. Call it what you want. I just think it's common sense. Continuing to progress may result in 1 or 2 nights of partner swapping, but in the long run, this will lead to jealousy, resentment, and possibly divorce. You and I will probably be the first. You are threatening me. No, I'm trying to make you see reality. I should have spoken up sooner, but I didn't want to risk what we had. I realize I'm risking a lot by talking about this, but I believe we can get through this. If I remain silent and continue to be led, I believe we will cause fatal damage to our relationship. I can't talk about it now. I am going to sleep. I'd rather you didn't join me. With these words, Tony left the room in tears. Tom cleaned the house and went to the guest bedroom. The next morning, Tom left the house before Tony woke up. When she got up late in the morning, she couldn't find Tom and had no idea where he had gone. She spent most of the morning crying. She didn't know what to do. She put all her energy into a great sexual adventure, and had nothing left to cope with the fact that her dream was crushed. She couldn't understand why Tom objected. What she planned was a natural progression of their sexual journey. How could Tom disagree? She had never felt so alone and abandoned. By lunchtime, she was desperate and searching for answers. She dug through her address book and found a phone number she hadn't called in months. She sat on her bed with her address book and phone for over an hour before she found the courage to dial the number. Marie answered on the second ring. "Hello?" All Marie heard were muffled sobs. "Hello? Marie? Tony, is that you? What happened?" "Marie, I need help. Tom and I had a fight last night, and I can't find him anywhere today. I don't know where he is. I don't know what he's going to do. I do not know what to do. I do not know anything. I've created such a mess that I don't think I can recover. I need to talk to someone, and you are my best choice. We haven't spoken in months, and I miss you. Maybe if I had kept in touch, I wouldn't be in this mess. Can you help? Will you help? Please, talk to me." "Calm down, Tony. Of course I'll talk to you. Today, or can it wait until lunch later this week? Now, if you can." "Can. Do you want me to come to you?" "No. I don't know if Tom will come home, and I don't want him to interrupt us. Can we meet somewhere where we can talk freely? This excludes restaurants and bars. How about the park on Locust Avenue? We can go for a walk, get some fresh air, and you can tell everything." "This will do. I can be there by 2 o'clock." "Agreed. See you in an hour." When Marie arrived at the park, she found Tony sitting alone on a bench near the entrance. Her head was bowed and her hands were folded in her lap. She was wearing an old hoodie, worn jeans, and old sneakers. Her hair was partially combed and she was not wearing makeup. Marie walked over to the bench and sat quietly next to Tony. They sat there without saying a word for several minutes. Finally, Tony took Marie's hand. "Thank you for coming." Marie stood up and slowly pulled Tony to his feet. "Let's take a walk, and you can start when you're ready." They walked together, choosing less crowded paths through the park. After a few minutes, Tony began to speak in a low voice. As soon as she started talking, she told Marie everything. She detailed how she and Tom got along great, how she wanted more, at least she did. Now she wasn't sure about Tom. She told Marie about her desire to have a wider sexual audience and her plan to achieve this. She described in detail the party that Marie and Mike did not attend. She told Marie about the subsequent parties and how happy she was that everyone was on the same page. She told Marie about the argument with Tom the night before and how she was crushed that he was killing her dream. She told Marie how she had gone to bed, upset and angry, and how she had told Tom to sleep in the other room. She told Marie how she woke up in the morning and couldn't find Tom. She told Marie how her resentment and anger turned to fear. "What did I do wrong? Why did Tom betray me like that?" Throughout the story, Marie walked next to Tony and listened. Tony finished as they passed a secluded bench and Marie took Tony's hand and motioned for them to sit. "Do you really want to hear my thoughts on what you said?" "Yes. It will be unpleasant. It might even hurt. Can you handle this?" "I think yes. I need to hear something. Anything to change my mood. You are the best person I can think of, even if what you say makes me angry." "Fine. Tony, what you told me is so wrong in so many ways that I don't even know where to begin. First of all, you somehow misunderstood the purpose of clothing-free days. This could also be my fault. It's true that when Mike and I started practicing naked days, improved sex was one of the first discoveries we made. However, over time, we realized that we were actually strengthening all aspects of our relationship, and sex was just part of that. Naked is the way to go, but sex is not the end goal, especially sex with other people. Tom and I didn't come to your party because we sensed where you were going. I should have been honest with you then. It's my fault. Everything that has happened since then is on you. Great sex is wonderful, but I can't understand how anyone can think that sex with more people will be better. Tom was right. If you were successful, You would trade a few hours of pleasure for a divorce or something worse. Even worse, you'd be responsible for ruining the relationships of at least 3 other couples. I think you already know it, even if you don't want to admit it. Your reaction to Tom's absence is very telling. I think you value your relationship with Tom more than you want to have sex with multiple partners. I don't know, Tony replied. I'm not thinking clearly right now, but you're right. I've been thinking about Tom all morning. Where is he? Is he okay? I barely thought about parties. I was heartbroken not because of the loss of my dream, but because of the loss of Tom. How could I get into this mess? I think you can figure it out without my help, but all is not lost. You haven't gone so far with a group that it can't be restored. If you stop now, they can figure it out themselves. Wherever they go, whatever they do, at least it won't be because you brought them there if you don't encourage them if you see them. You think so? Yes. The real problem now is how to repair your relationship with Tom. Even here, I think, all is not lost. You seem to be starting to understand Tom's argument. I think if you talk to Tom, explain that you now understand him, agree with him, apologize for doubting him, and tell him you're done with the group, you can recover. You can do it. He was right. I understand that now, but it will be difficult to humiliate myself in front of him like that. Think about everything you have and how great your relationship has become. I think with all this in mind, it will be easier than you think, and the result will strengthen your relationship even more. I don't know. Come with me to the car and think about it. When they reached the park entrance, Tony turned to Marie and said, "Thank you for coming. Your point of view was exactly what I needed. I think I can talk to Tom, and I'm really done with the group. I hope he will listen to me." I think he will listen. He's coming home, and that's a statement about where he wants to be. Make him want to be here and make you feel good here too. Everything will be okay. Just give it time. With these words, they hugged and went to their cars. After Marie left, Tony simply wandered around the city, not knowing what to do next. It was already long after midnight when she returned home. The house was dark, not a single light was on. When she walked through the front door and turned on the light, Tom was sitting on the couch. He seemed to have been sitting there for quite some time. Tony staggered across the room and half bent over at Tom's feet. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I didn't understand what I was doing so wrong. You opened my eyes. I understand. When I think about losing you or having sex with others, there is no choice. Losing you is not an option. What can I do to make things better? Whatever you want, just give me another chance." Tom seemed surprised by Tony's tearful confession. "Honestly, I don't want to lose you either, but I came back today to run into you. No matter how difficult it was, I was ready to give you an ultimatum. Now I don't have to do that. What changed your mind?" "When I didn't find you in the morning, I had a feeling of great loss and emptiness. I have never felt such loneliness. In desperation, I called Marie and spent the entire day talking to her. I've been driving around town for the last few hours thinking about what she and you said. I realized that there is no equivalence between happiness and pleasure, especially when happiness already includes as much pleasure as I need. The sacrifice was not worth the small gain and the huge loss. Eventually, I realized that I was not a person who considered sexual extremes. I forgot how I was raised, the vows I made, and my personal moral code, and became a stranger in my own body. I deeply regret what I suggested and am willing to do anything to undo the harm caused. I desperately want you by my side if you agree. I must admit that I am amazed at your sudden change. I want you to be near me too. We can work together, and I am confident that we can restore what we may have lost. I also don't think you did any real harm. We didn't take a single step that could hurt anyone. If we stop group meetings now, no one has done anything they would regret. Think about it. You didn't offer anything that Marie didn't offer you. I think we'll just leave it as it is and let others develop on their own without our influence." That night, Tony and Tom went out for a quiet dinner together. It was like they were getting to know each other for the first time. On Monday morning, Tony sent an email to the other 6, explaining that they all now had the same knowledge as she and Tom, and further group meetings would be unnecessary and possibly limiting. She wished them luck and encouraged each of them to use their imagination to make the most of their relationship. Within a few weeks, Tony and Tom were passionate lovers again and truly became friends. Tony and Marie rekindled their friendship and resumed their weekly lunch meetings. The four of them got together in the evenings from time to time, but never during the house rule. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the